When we talk about who becomes a politician in the UK, we usually think about things like elections, political parties, sheer ambition. But what if the biggest factor isn't any of those things? Today, we're going to look at the unseen forces, these subtle but powerful pressures that quietly decide who even gets a chance to walk through the doors of Parliament. You know, whenever Parliament is in the news, the debate is always about the rules or reforms or the latest scandal. But there's a much deeper question that we almost never talk about, one that's kind of sitting there, just off stage. And that question is simply this. If you forget all the theory, all the stuff in the textbooks for a minute, in the real world, day to day, who is this chaotic, demanding, unpredictable system really built for? The answer? Well, it's pretty revealing. Right, so let's really dive into that. This is the unspoken question. How can an institution like Parliament end up selecting for certain types of people, even if nobody ever intended for that to happen? Okay, so here's the key idea. No one ever sat down and deliberately designed Parliament to exclude people. But systems don't need a grand plan to act as a filter. They just do it automatically, simply by what they make easy to do and what they make incredibly hard. And that whole process creates what we can call Parliament's invisible filter. So let's break down what that really means and how this filter actually operates on a practical level. The technical term for this is selection pressure. It's basically when the environment itself, the culture, the crazy hours, the unspoken expectations, starts to favor certain traits over others. It's not a rule written down anywhere. It's just a consequence of how the whole place runs. So what does this actually look like in Parliament? Well, the job quietly demands a ton from you. I mean, think about it. The hours are completely unpredictable. Late nights are just normal. You're away from your home and family for long stretches, and you have to be ready to be on at a moment's notice. This isn't in the official job description, but it is the reality of the job. So that rhythm, that constant churn and chaos, it naturally starts to favor a very specific kind of person. Someone whose life allows them to just absorb all that disruption without everything else falling apart. And what this creates is a really interesting and maybe a little worrying kind of trade-off. It seems like the system starts to value sheer endurance more than actual life experience. The ability to just keep going, no matter what, becomes this incredibly valuable trait. And you can see the results laid out pretty starkly right here. The system just makes life so much harder for some people. You know, anyone with young kids, or who's caring for a relative, or just needs a tiny bit of predictability. And who doesn't make it easier for? Well, people whose personal lives are more flexible, people who don't have those caring duties, or, let's face it, people who have a partner at home who can carry the entire domestic load. And this is so important to get. This isn't about motivation. It's not about commitment. People don't decide against politics because they're not dedicated enough. They do it because the personal cost to their health, to their family, to their sanity is just way too high. It's a totally rational decision. Just think about this for a second. In almost any other job on the planet, working like this, constantly on the edge of burnout, would be seen as a huge red flag. They'd be warning signs. But in the world of politics, it gets reframed as dedication. It's treated like a badge of honor. So what? Why does this matter? Because this isn't just about who gets to be a politician. This filtering process has a direct impact on the kinds of decisions that get made for every single one of us. You can actually trace a pretty clear chain reaction. It all starts with a system rewarding endurance. So a certain type of person is just more likely to thrive in that environment. And because they're the ones in the room making decisions, their life experiences influence which problems feel important, which ones feel intuitive. And that, in turn, ends up shaping what kinds of solutions and trade-offs seem, well, acceptable. Again, it's so important to remember, this is not about blaming individuals. It's not a moral failing on the part of the people who succeed in this system. It's a structural failing of the system itself, one that has real, tangible effects on policy and the way the country is governed. So if the problem really is structural, that leads to a massive final question. Are we just stuck with this, or is this a system we could actually redesign? This quote just nails the contradiction at the heart of it all. We all say we want Parliament to be more representative, to look more like the country it serves. But at the same time, we've ended up with a working environment that is actively hostile to the kind of ordinary lives that most people in the country actually lead. But here's the glimmer of hope. Remember how we started this? These chaotic, punishing work patterns, they weren't part of some master plan. Nobody designed them this way on purpose. They just sort of evolved. And if they weren't designed intentionally, that means they aren't set in stone. And that leaves us with this one final critical question to mull over. What would actually happen if we stopped treating Parliament's culture as this unchangeable force of nature? What if we started to think of its working patterns as a design problem that we could solve? Not to make the job easier, but to make our politics more sustainable, more inclusive, and ultimately better at serving the very people it's supposed to represent.